All the spectators widened their eyes in shock. They saw the knight lying in front of the boy, but they could not believe that the young master had won. Arcus raised his hand in confusion and announced that Lloyd Frontera had won the duel. The blonde was lying on the ground and did not understand how such a master of the sword could lose to the scum. The aristocrat came closer and, throwing the shovel over his shoulder, said that the man had been beaten. The hero swung and said that it was time for the long-awaited punishment. The man looked up in fear. The baron jumped up and shouted that the duel was already over. The young man began to beat the enemy with a shovel. Arcus frowned and shouted his son's name in rage. The knights immediately began to hold the protagonist so that he would stop hitting Newman with a shovel. Bayern stood next to Xavier at this time and looked at what was happening with an angry expression, suggesting that the protagonist had gone crazy. At this time, Xavier looked ahead with sadness and realized that Lloyd could have lost his mind. The protagonist at this time waved his hands and sighed heavily, because he ordered to let him go because he had calmed down. Then he put the shovel on the ground and his hands on his belt, sighing with relief. Then he started hitting his opponent with the shovel again and they tried to restrain him again. Xavier looked through his bangs with displeasure and realized, if you look closely, he was hitting him so as not to hurt him too much. At this time, the blonde with a mustache screamed from the blows. The brown-haired man at this time looked at his opponent angrily, but Xavier saw this calm expression on his face because he seemed to know in advance what would happen next and as if he already knew everything. At this time, the guy with blue hair looked ahead coldly. In his memories, 15 days before the duel, the brown-haired man leaned his hand on the blade and wanted to learn the Azarakan technique of the mind. At that moment, Xavier looked at him in surprise, and the brown-haired man did not understand such a reaction because he asked to teach him something good and not stealing. It was a silhouette of a man who absorbed the aura streams, because in addition to the assimilated mana, it can attract mana from what surrounds him and transform it into his mana. At that moment, the knight looked at him intently and asked the master how he knew this, because he understood that he had always kept this technique a secret because it was still not complete.